down on that thing, but I am going to say that in a lot of ways, right, each of these individuals, right, they represent various forces that are at work in Europe today. And what is fascinating to watch, but also frightening to contemplate, is the way that individual personalities and individual circumstances, will shape the ability of the different states involved to manage all of these crises. So, I want to talk about a couple of specific things as we wrap it up. So, first, the German election. Right? As you know, the Germans voted on the 24th of September. And the result was, it's funny, when you look at the headlines in a lot of American media, was Angela Merkel wins 4th term in office, which is one of those statements that is false, but kind of true. Which, so like as there's at the University of Pennsylvania, there's a street that's paved with little pithy sayings by Benjamin Franklin, because everything at the University of Pennsylvania relates back to Benjamin Franklin. And he actually, there is one that actually says, half a truth is often a great lie. Which, did Merkel win re-election? Yes, she did, kind of, but not really, and as a result, we really don't know what kind of situation she's going to have. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, here's the story. Back in 2013, German politics are great because political parties are known by the colors of their that are associated with them. So, the Christian Democratic Union and its Bavarian Christian Social Union, they are black, clerical, Catholic. Red is the Social Democratic Party, the traditional socialist. Yellow is the Free Democratic Liberal Party. Purple or dark green is the Left Party, which is more to the left of the Social Democrats. Green is for the environmentalist Greens. Blue is for the right-wing nationalist Alternative for Germany. In 2013, you see, Merkel did pretty well. The CDU did quite well, right? She this is the percentage of the vote. These are the seats in the Bundestag, the parliament. Her party alone almost had a majority all to itself. But she created what they call a grand coalition, which was a coalition between the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats. So these are the two biggest parties. They made a coalition together, which is good for getting things done in the sense that you've got plenty of votes in parliament, but can be bad because it creates the impression that the two largest parties are essentially indistinguishable from each other. And generally speaking, grand coalitions encourage the rise of fringe parties. People who say that the governing parties are a cartel and whatnot. And we see the difference between 2013 and then 4 years later. In 2017, the result is rather different. The CDU did win, right? They got the biggest vote, the most votes, but they got about 33% of the vote. And you see all the other numbers. And this is the one that caught everybody's eye here, is the Alternative for Germany received nearly 13% of the vote. Now, the German Constitution, for obvious historical reasons, is written in part to hinder the rise of radical parties by requiring a party to get at least 5% of the national vote before it can send any representatives to the Bundestag. In 2013, the Alternative for Germany got 4.7% of the vote. So bad enough, but they didn't send anybody to parliament. This time they got almost 13%, and they are the third largest party in parliament. Right. 93 votes, not enough to hinder the creation of a government, but a worrying number. And the problem then is, what kind of government can Merkel build, right? That she could go back to a grand coalition, but the Social Democrats, her partner in the grand coalition, their result in this election on the 24th was their worst since was their worst since 1890. And so there was a sense that they needed to go into the opposition because being Merkel's junior partner was not good for them. So they've said, we're not going to do this one. A coalition between Merkel's party and the liberal Free Democrats was the one that a lot of people were kind of hoping for, be kind of a center-right coalition that might allow for more variety, but they don't have a majority. So there are only two mathematical possibilities, especially if we assume that no government is going to include the AfD, the Alternative for Germany. The only mathematical possibility left that's being negotiated right now is this one here, what the Germans refer to as the Jamaica Coalition. I should have asked this in high school kids. You know why they call it the Jamaica Coalition? The colors of the Jamaican flag. Yeah, man, exactly. That's right. Now, this would be, the Jamaica Coalition has existed on a couple of state levels, but they have not yet, it has not yet been tried at the national level. And it remains to be seen, while there are certain affinities between some Christian Democrats and the Liberals, and between some Christian Democrats and the Greens, relationship between the Greens and the Free Democrats is difficult. These are essentially both parties that appeal to the educated middle class, urban middle class largely, but one is more free market oriented, one is more environmental oriented. The joke that I heard one German scholar say was that this is a competition between Germans who drive an SUV with a guilty conscience and those who drive an SUV without one. And so whether that will lead to a stable majority. Right now, they're waiting to start negotiations about creating a government. So we have this. So as I say, did Angela Merkel win a fourth term as chancellor? Sort of. She won the right to try to create a government. If, however, she is incapable of pulling together a majority, or if this majority only lasts until there is a big disagreement between these two parties, it is possible that there will need to be new elections, or it may be possible that Merkel will be forced to resign in order to allow a different coalition to form. Nobody knows. The Germans are waiting, because even though the national elections were on the 24th, there are big state elections this coming Sunday. In Lower Saxony, up in the north. And people are waiting to see how this was an election that had to be scheduled because of a government crisis in that state. And everybody's waiting to see how the numbers shake out there as a sort of barometer of public opinion. But this is one problem, right, is that Angela Merkel is weakened by the German elections. And then there's everything else, right? You know, there's the migrant problem is part of this larger issue of how should the European Union deal with the flood of migrants from outside of Europe, even though the flow has restricted quite a bit. In 2015, in one of her few truly, we could say even radical decisions, Merkel had allowed for hundreds of thousands of refugees to come to Germany. And one of the points that people point to is why the rise of the Alternative for Deutschland and why did she lose some support is a kind of reaction against that particular decision. But this was a difficult situation for the Germans in 2015. There were people knocking on the door all around here. There were terrible scenes of overcrowded camps in Greece and overcrowded camps in Central Europe. A tractor trailer was found on the side of the road with hundreds of corpses in it from people who had tried to escape in it. And so Merkel made this decision in the fall of 2015 to allow more refugees to come to Germany, was initially praised all around the world for her humanitarianism, and especially for considering Germany's past, got herself named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. But domestically, it has sort of been an anchor, and not in a good way, sort of holding down her political fortunes. And Germany's not the only place where immigration is played a role. Immigration played a role in the debate over Brexit. Immigration played a role in the French presidential election. Right? The longer-term question, back to this idea of the shape and the size and the nature of Europe, is who's a European? Who's allowed to be a European? Who can become a European? What are the responsibilities of the individual European states to define themselves into the future? Right? All of these big questions continue to hover over European domestic politics and over the European Union, because the European Union is in this odd place of technically being an entity with a common external border, but they don't have an effective common border control. They don't have an effective common Coast Guard. And that's because the individual states didn't want to give up their sovereignty over their borders or give up their sovereignty over their military forces. Because the European Union is in this halfway house. It's just strong enough to upset nationalists like Nigel Farage, but not strong enough to actually deal with problems in a common manner like immigration. And then there's the problem of the euro, right? Just to sum it up in this image of Greece's debt, right, is that the euro as a common currency is also a halfway house, right? Because the euro, 19 member states of the European Union use the euro, not all. And Those that do, right, enjoy some benefits of lower interest rates. 5 minutes? Okay. Enjoy some benefits of lower interest rates, but they're also very much tied to the Germans. And the Germans then, when the Germans have profited from the euro, but when a state like Greece runs into debt problems, the Germans say, well, we don't have to bail out the Greeks because, it's your responsibility, it's their fault for their debt. But of course, they went into debt to buy German stuff. So there is but this also feeds into this larger problem of how can the European Union, which is not really a federal state, it's one thing to work in good times when the euro was created in 1999, when it went into effect. There was a feeling that times were so good, the economy was booming, that it was going to be such a success that it would sort of pull politics behind it. But it was a fair weather agreement. Because as soon as you run into an economic problem and you realize there's no common treasury, there are no common bonds. Right? There is a central bank that can set interest rates, but not anybody who can sell debt. Because those would be political decisions. It would be as if they created the dollar before they created the United States Treasury. The euro may turn out to be a bridge too far. And we'll come back to that in your questions. And then I'm going to end with this. As you might know, in Catalonia, here, the Catalans are talking about seceding from Spain because they claim to be independent. This map imagines what would happen if all of the individual ethnic groups of Europe each claimed their independent states. And I bring this up because I'm going to end with this, right? You contrast this map to our other map, is that many of the critics of the European Union, I'm going to out myself here as a fan of the European Union, but many critics of the European Union base their criticism on the idea that the nation-state boundaries that exist within the European Union are somehow holy and perfect and ideal. What they tend to ignore is the fact that those boundaries themselves are artificial human creations that were often creations of convenience and were almost always produced by force. And so if we want Europe to function, right, if we want Europe to do well, right, we want all these people to get along with each other. Right? There can be a variety of levels of government and organization. But to go to this, I don't think could be in anybody's interest. Right? So the idea for the Europeans is to figure out how can all of these different folks who have managed to work together within things like France or Spain or Germany or Poland, how can you then get these, France, Spain, Germany, Poland, how can you get them to work together? Right? So these are not new questions. Right? Ever since the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West, when Odoacer overthrew Romulus Augustulus in 476, Western Europe has been fragmented, and Europeans have been trying to figure out whether some kind of new form of unity is possible, whether it's desirable, and what they have to do to get there. They're still asking themselves those questions today. Thanks very much.